everyone. Welcome to SharePoint Power Hour. Glad to have you guys here. So you may realize that I am not Laura Rogers. I know you guys are used to seeing her on here. She's actually on vacation, a well-deserved vacation, and she'll be back in our office a little bit later this week. But I used to do Power Hours a lot when we first started, and I decided I wanted to kind of jump in and do one today while she was out, just to kind of get some content out there for you guys. So if you are joining Power Hour for the first time, definitely check out the description of this video. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a link to sign up for our Slack channel, and that is where we have a lot of Q&A and different discussions and stuff going on during the session. So feel free to fill that out, and we'll get you added into the Slack channel. So I hope everybody is having a great day. I am Joelle Farley. You probably see me a lot in the Power Hour Slack channel if you're in there, usually during Laura's sessions. I work with Laura at IW Mentor, and I have worked with SharePoint for about 10 years. And I've worked with a lot of the same stuff that Laura does, work with a lot with business applications, and also helping people design their intranets and doing like all the fun information architect type stuff as well. So what I wanted to do, and this is actually something that I think we will do regularly, fairly regularly, as regular as Office 365 makes it, is to basically have a session of Power Hour where we just kind of go through some of the new changes and things that have happened over the past weeks and even months. I think that's just helpful. A lot of this stuff we see during the different conferences, or maybe a Microsoft does like a webinar or something, and we kind of see it from their side, like their demo sites and stuff. But putting, as we well know, putting some of that stuff into in action is a little bit of a different process. So it's kind of nice to see once we actually have the tools to actually demo them and go through them and make sure that that they actually work, and see what the pros and cons are and that kind of thing. So today, I want to talk. I think I'm going to start with hub sites, because just as a few days ago, I think we now have access to go ahead and promote a site to a hub site, and we'll talk about what those are in just a second, and kind of utilize those. So I played around with them a little bit in my own tenant, so I want to go ahead and show you guys some information about that. I think also what I'll probably do is, once we kind of talk through hub sites in a related way, we'll go through just some changes to modern web parts and modern pages. Some of these things I think maybe have hit Office 365 in November, and some of them might be a little bit more recent, but kind of just covering a couple of different things there. And then if we have time, I'll talk about some stuff in Planner. So I actually use Planner quite a bit. And I think it's a really neat, easy to use task management tool. And they have put some new features in there that I think are really, really cool. So I'll go through those as well if we have time. Before I start any of that, I do want to mention, and I think Tony actually mentioned this in our Slack channel, there is actually, speaking of kind of relevant for today, there is actually a Collab 365 webinar on hub sites in Office 365, and it's got some really cool people on that, and that is happening at 1 p.m. Eastern. Let me grab a link and I'll paste that into the Slack channel for you guys, because then that way, if you do happen to have 2 hours free this afternoon, so after you listen to this, it might be good to go over there and listen to that and kind of see it from the perspective of Microsoft and some of the MVPs and stuff. So really, really kind of good timing for what we're talking about today. So, I will try to wrap up a few minutes early so that you guys have time if you do want to listen to that as well. That way you guys have time to get over there and check that out. Alright, so hub sites. So let's talk a little bit about those. Let's see, give me 1 second. Alright, so hub sites, they've been talking about hub sites for quite a few months, maybe even almost a year now. And basically the whole idea behind a hub site is to basically create this top level site, if you will, that allows you to Not have subsites, because as you probably have noticed, we're trying to go with more of a flat structure of site hierarchy in Office 365. We want to keep it like very flat. But it basically allows you to take one of your sites and deem it to be a hub site. And then you can connect other sites, like other communication and team sites that you have. You can connect those to that hub site. And the reason for that is so that you can have things like cross-site navigation. You can have content roll. You can be able to like roll up content onto the hub site from the things that are connected to it. Search, I think, is a thing. I haven't been able to play with that part yet, but I know that that's part of it, like a scope search. And then also just branding. So if you can have like a consistent look and feel that you add it to the hub site, and then it carries down through all of the sites that are connected to it. So really neat. Specifically, the thing that I kind of wanted to test and understand was the navigation. That is something that as I mentioned earlier, I work a lot with intranets, and I've been working on intranets and helping people design intranets for many years. And so one of the things that always was a struggle, it's possible, but was kind of a struggle, was just basically having a consistent navigation when you had a larger intranet that was made up of multiple site collections and not just one site collection with a bunch of subsites. So you can use, as you guys probably are familiar, you could use managed metadata navigation, and you could do different things there to basically get a cross-site clean navigation. However, there were some quirks to that, and a lot of times with my customers, it ended up being a little bit of an overhead to kind of consistently manage those links and kind of keep everything clear across all the sites. So the fact that HubSites kind of has this ability built right into it, it's pretty cool. I think people will really like this specifically for intranet purposes. So yeah, so I think it's pretty neat. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look. Actually, before I do that, let me just make sure, because I'm the only one on here today, I might be a little delayed in answering your questions, but I promise I will check and look for them. Okay, looks like we're good. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at a site, or let me start with this. How do you actually get a site and make it a hub site? Start there. So as of right now, this is something that you have to do with PowerShell in Office 365. It's a really simple script, but it is something that you have to have the ability to be able to do the SharePoint management shell, basically, to be able to run a script that will take a site and make it a hub site. One thing that you do want to keep in mind is that if you look right here on my SharePoint, this is just my SharePoint app of my tenant. But you'll notice that if I hit create site, I have the options of team site and communication site. So it has to be one of those in order to be able to be promoted to a hub site. So just keep that in mind. You can't take a classic site and promote that to a hub site. So that's just kind of an important thing to keep in mind, especially if you are in Office 365 but you're dealing with a lot of classic sites. Basically, it can be one that you already created and already has content in it, that's fine, or you can just go and create a fresh one. So I actually already have a site, and I just called it Hub just to keep it real easy. So this is my site, it's called Hub. And what I did to make this a hub site is I ran a script, and I'm going to go ahead and grab that link and paste it for you. And we'll take a look at how to do that. And I like this link too because it actually talks about if you have not run any, and I'll just open it actually for you guys to look at. Oops. There we go. So what I like about this too is if you haven't run anything in the online management, SharePoint online management shell, this actually it gives you a link to download that, and then it also gives you a link over to how to connect your site. So basically, you have to have access to the admin center for SharePoint, and then you should be able to authenticate and connect, and then you can go ahead and run the actual specific script related to the hub site. So here on that link that I posted, basically once you're in the management shell, once you connect to SharePoint online, then you have this command right here. So it's register-spo hub site, and then you paste in the URL of whatever site you want to promote to a hub site. And that's it. It's really that simple. Hopefully, I think at some point I'm thinking maybe it's just because it's early on or not, but I'm wondering if this is something that they're going to put into the like admin center. I know that they're, if you guys have noticed, if you've been in the admin center recently, you can see up in the top corner that they're doing some updates to it. So I'm wondering if maybe this will just become a feature that you can just click and promote something to a hub site. I'm sure it will. But for now, if you want to go ahead and get going on hub sites, you've been waiting for them, you need them, then this is a great way to go ahead and do that. Another part of the script right here, which they of course explain, but I'll kind of go through it in our terms, layman's terms. This script right here, so let's say if you have specific, like you need to create multiple hub sites. Like let's say you're a very big organization and you might have, HR consists of multiple different site collections, and they kind of have their own branding and navigation, and that HR needs to be one, and then finance needs to be one. That can happen. So let's say you want to make sure that when somebody is in their site and they're wanting to connect their site to a hub site, that they can only see the option, they can only connect to certain hub sites. Well, you can actually, when you promote a site to a hub site, you can actually specify which groups, a security group basically, that could promote their site to a hub site. So the way that it kind of talks about is basically going into Office 365 and creating a mail-enabled security group and putting the site owners that you know will need to use this hub site into that group, and then running the script that you see here that I've highlighted, and basically saying that only that mail-enabled security group will actually see this hub site when they're on their site and connecting. And that'll make a little bit more sense when we actually go into a site and connect it. But that's just something to keep in mind, that you can control that. So that way you don't have some site owner over in a completely different area connecting into the HR hub site, if that makes sense. So that's a really good thing, for governance purposes. Obviously, some organizations may just start out with one hub site, so it doesn't really matter. But, as you kind of grow and think of how you're going to utilize these, that's just something to know, that you can actually control that. Okay, so I think I posted that link. Yep, I posted that link out there, so feel free to try that out. And so one thing that I noticed as soon as I posted that link, or as soon as I ran that script rather, on this site/hub that I have, the one thing I noticed is that all of a sudden I have this top level nav right here. And hopefully you guys can see that. So it says hub, that's the name of this site. And then it says functions and resources. So I added those later, but when I first came into the site, it just said hub, and then it had this space here. So this is where the navigation will live that's going to carry across anything that's connected to this hub site. So you can edit this. You can, from the main hub site, you can go ahead and put in all the links that you need to put in. And then as you connect things to this, they'll automatically inherit that navigation. So I have a site. So if I click HR here, I already did one, just to kind of show you. So this is a HRA site, and as you can see, when I come over to this site, it automatically has, and you can see that's its own site collection, and it automatically inherits that navigation. So that's kind of the first thing that I noticed that I really liked, because as I mentioned earlier with managed metadata navigation, this sometimes was quite an undertaking to get across multiple site collections. So let me show you now. Once you've run the script, once you have your hub site, so once we have our hub site, how do we then take an existing site that we have and connect it into the hub site network, if you will? So I'm going to go back here. I have a site called IT. I think this is the right IT site. Probably have multiple in this environment. So I have a site called IT, and I want to go ahead, and you'll see right now it does not have that navigation at the top. I want to go ahead and connect to that hub site. I'm the site owner, so it's as easy as going to Site, Actions Gear, clicking Site Information. And then down here, I see Hub Site Association. And I can click this, and then the hub, that's the one that I created, I can go ahead and click on that. So as I mentioned earlier, this would be kind of where that security script comes into play, because if I was IT and the other one was like an HR hub and I didn't have access to it, then I would not see that option here. But then somebody in HR who did have access to it would see that option. So just kind of cool to know that you have that option. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click Hub and save. And as you can see, just like that, there is my navigation here. So I can go ahead and I can hover over it, and I can see the same navigation that I saw in the main hub and then the HR site. So what do you guys think about that? Anybody think that's kind of cool and exciting? Just want to see if there's any reactions to that, any woohoos, because I think that's pretty neat. Alright, and so what I can show here too is if I go back and click on Hub, which clicking on Hub brings me back to this page, I can go ahead and edit this and add IT. Let's see. And save that. And let's see. And this is something I actually noticed. I was playing around with because I noticed this. There is something weird about the way that the link is added. So if I go back over to the IT site and refresh, it takes a few seconds, I think. I don't know. I kept noticing some weird, like almost like caching or something like that was happening. Let's see. It's thinking about it. So we see HR and IT, and I go back over to IT. I think I'll refresh. Yeah, see, it's still not doing it. Let me do a... Yeah, that's something that I was noticing earlier. It took like a little while to show up. And I don't know if it was something just with like my browser caching it or not. So that's kind of interesting. Something to kind of keep in mind and keep an eye on. Eventually it did. So like when I made a change to the navigation here. Yeah, let's see. I think we have a question. Let's see. Oh yeah, first, yeah. So this is basically, you were talking, Tony's talking about the first release thing. Yeah, so this is definitely a first release for the tenant situation. So it's, you can go ahead and check site information on a communication or team site and see if you see that option, and that'll kind of tell you whether or not your tenant is there. But yeah, it's definitely a first release for your tenant thing, and I think it's going to kind of, as these things go, it kind of will roll out slowly after that. But which is probably good, because like I said, there's some quirkiness with that, how it hasn't shown me the update that I made to this quite yet. Let's see if it shows it now. I'm curious. Nope, still not yet. Okay, we'll come back to that. So as you can see, though, that's the general idea with the navigation, is that once you connect it in, it would automatically take the navigation across the top here, and it would add that to all the sites that you connect in. So it might be a good idea too, just because of that weird, like I was saying, seeing that weird issue for now at least, to go ahead and make sure on the hub site you create your full navigation and then go in and connect all the sites, and then that way there's none of that kind of trickiness that I'm seeing there. There is more options, and as we get into, I figured what I'll probably do is just go through some of the page things that I wanted to talk about. And actually on some of these web parts, once you promote a site to a hub site, you actually get additional options. So like your news web part, your highlighted content web part, you'll see additional options that you wouldn't normally see that involve being a hub site. So we'll look at those as we kind of go through. But that's pretty much it. Just for like really simple, just kind of the initial making a site a hub site and then connecting into that. Do you guys have any questions about that before I move on to talk about some of the page stuff? And like I said, we'll talk more about uh, some hub site stuff as we go on. Let me take a look here and see if you got any questions. Looks like somebody is typing, so. Okay, so it says, does the hub site navigation show up with the SharePoint mobile app? So I have not tested that, but from what I read, it's supposed to. So I have not tested that myself to see, but yeah, from what I've read from looking at the hub site stuff, it's supposed to show up in the mobile app. So, all right. All right. All right, we'll kind of move on now. So we talked a little bit about that. So we'll kind of move on and talk about modern pages. And actually, I just looked at, I think I just saw, is the quality of my screen okay for you guys? It looks like it's kind of hit and miss. But let me know if the quality isn't too bad. I think I can adjust the size of my screen, and that might, or just adjust my display and make the quality a little bit better. So just let me know if any point you really can't see what I'm trying to show. All right, so modern pages. So there are quite a few things that I want to kind of talk through, and just different web part stuff that I think is that have come out that I think are pretty good to know. So the first thing is the news. So when you add news to your site, so we can click new and do news post here. As you add news to your site, you can then utilize the news web part, which we see here, and it will automatically add, as you add news posts, it'll add those articles to your news web part, and then once there's like 5, it creates an archive, and that kind of thing. So let me go ahead and edit this web part. So as you create news, and I'm going to go over, actually, you know what, I'm going to start with the article. Sorry, guys, I'm hopping around a little bit. I'm going to start with actually creating the article real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and click News Post, and we'll just say upcoming company event. And I'll just put on very creative here. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and publish that. So I created a news post. It's called Upcoming Company Event. So I'm going to go ahead and click back on that. It's now added to my web part. One thing that I wanted to mention is that when you create news posts now, you have this promote button here. And also when you see the same settings when you create just like a regular page, modern page, you get these same settings. So if I click promote, then I can actually from here easily add page to the navigation. It tells me if the page was posted as news. I can email it, and then I get a link to it as well. So where I can easily copy the address. I think that's pretty cool, just because for some people, end users that are not familiar with this stuff, it's kind of an easy way for them to be able to know how to promote a page or news that they create. Another thing, like I said, if you create a regular page on your site, you'll actually, when you hit publish, those settings automatically pop up for you. So that's just kind of something that I wanted to point out, because that's kind of a newer thing. The promote thing is something that they've added more recently. Another thing that comes up, before I get to the news web part, I wanted to talk about this. Another thing that comes up is a lot of end users struggle to find the news, like behind the scenes. Like, let's say if they have an article they need to delete or something like that, they kind of struggle to be able to find that. And so I always like to point out, and something that you can do if you're like a power user or a site owner, is if we go to site contents. A lot of you probably know this already, but those news pages are getting stored in site pages. And so here I can see the site pages that are out there. The problem with this, though, and this is where I've actually had people think that this is just the news. And they come out here and they go, oh, well, I don't know what these other articles are. And they delete them and they end up being actual site pages, so actual pages that are in the site and not just news. So that can be a little bit confusing. And so an easy way, besides having to create metadata and doing it manually, an easy way for you to teach end users, and I actually learned this trick from Sue Hanley. An easy way for you to do that is to use what we call the promoted state column, and this is just a column that's out of the box. It's automatically a part of SharePoint. Is to use that column and group by that column so that people can easily see what are news articles and what are not news articles. And of course, that's going to take a little bit of training because promoted state isn't going to mean anything to them. But it is something kind of good to know. It's something that you don't have to then add, because I've seen other people, what they do is they create a news page and then they train people to add a tag for news or something. But you don't have to do that. So basically, if I click add here, I can go ahead and add columns, show hide columns. And one of the site pages columns that I have, as I mentioned, is promoted state. So I go ahead and I can add that to my view. And then I can go ahead and I can click here and I can group by this. And then what I can do is I can even save that. So save view as, and I'll say, oops, by promoted state. And what I have here is that anything that is promoted state 2 is news. Anything else, any other promoted states, are just regular pages. I think they're typically 0. But that's one easy way for you to, without having to add any tags or anything like that, that's an easy way for you to say, hey, if you have to come in and delete a news article or something like that, you can see here that the promoted state 2 is your news. The other stuff, they're actual pages. Don't delete those. So that's just something to keep in mind. Of course, you could also create a filtered view if you wanted to, and only show promoted state 2 in that view, and just say only click this view. These are your news articles. You can kind of do this a couple of different ways. The reason I like grouping though is because let's say if they clicked on the home page, they clicked new, and they didn't hit news post, they just hit page. And then later they decide, oh, actually I meant for that to be a news post. Is there any way I can make this page a news post? Using the grouped by view, you can actually do that. So let me just create, I'll just create a site page. And I'm just going to call this my new article. Like I said, I'm so creative with this stuff. Actually, hit publish here. Oh, and this is, as I mentioned, when a regular page is created, you get to see those things as well. So here, this is something that's new, they can click here to hit post as news on the site, and that would then promote it to promoted stage 2. But let's say they forget to do that, they didn't see this option, they just clicked X, they didn't read it. We know that end users love to read stuff, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click X there, and then I'm going to go back to site contents. And site pages, and go back to that view that I created. I don't think it was the default view. Oops. And so here's my new article. So now I want to make this news. So I didn't see that option, or maybe that option isn't in your tenant yet, the one where it said post this news. So I can go ahead and drag this down to the promoted state 2 area and let it go. And just like that, now it's been made news. And if I go back to my home page, I think I have my news web part showing 4 articles. Yep, there it is, my new article. So now it's added into the news web part. Alright, let's make sure. Okay, I think you guys are just talking about the first release tenant stuff. Yeah, those things are interesting, how they have those things set up. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's see what else I wanted to talk about news. Let's see. Alright, so the news web part. So I'm going to go ahead and edit my page. So the news web part itself, you guys have probably, if you're using Modern Pages, have probably utilized this before. So this is one thing that I wanted to mention because when you promote a site to a hub site, you get a setting now in your news source. So it used to be just this site, and then you can select specific sites to kind of roll up news from. But now you can actually do all sites in the hub. So this is the hub. Like, think of this as your intranet homepage. I can now say, okay, roll up news from anything that's connected to it. So if it's HR's news, it's IT's news, anything like that, it now can roll up into this web part. It doesn't just have to be created at this level, it can roll up. So that's really neat, and kind of gets us a little bit closer to things we could do with content search web parts and stuff in classic pages. You also have the hub news, and I think that's what this is. I'm not sure if this is. I was looking at this earlier because it doesn't quite match the little icon they have for hub news. So I'm not sure if that is, completely ready or not. But you can basically use top story. You can do a list of articles like this. Side by side. That really only works if you're using just a one column section on your page. And then also there's the top story. So I'll leave it at the top story one. Actually, I can just put it at hub news for now. So that's really all I wanted to point out there. Really, the news web part is pretty much the same, just that when you promote to a hub site, you have that all sites in the hub option. So I'll go ahead and publish for that. Another thing that I want to point out with news is that something that I think is really neat, and if you don't have hub sites yet, or it's going to take you a little while to kind of roll out hub sites, you do still have an ability to let users get a roll-up of news. So basically, if I go to my SharePoint home, so the actual SharePoint app itself in my app launcher, there's this news from sites here. And then this will basically roll up news from sites that they either have clicked the follow button on or that they just visit a lot. It'll roll up news, and it kind of will have that all here. And then once they, have more than just two, like I have, they'll be able to click to kind of see all news and kind of get a nice list of all the recent articles. So that's something that if you are in an organization that has a big, internal communications and uses the intranet quite a bit, and you need that, but like I said, you're not quite ready for hub sites and haven't quite gotten that rollout together yet, then this is an easy way to point users to kind of come here first and get a roll-up of news. So just something I like to point out. All right. So let's see if there are any other questions. I don't think so. All right, so let's talk about a couple more web parts that have had updates recently. All right, so the highlighted content web part. So it has been around a while. It's kind of like the modern page answer to the content search web part. But there, initially, right out of the gate, there was a lot of complaints because it didn't really have as many options as the highlighted as the content search web part. It still doesn't. It's still not as customizable, but they did add some things that make it a little bit better. And so I wanted to kind of talk through some of those. And I think some of this came out maybe at the end of last year, beginning of this year. So you may have already some of these things may already be in your tenant if you're not first release. So the highlighted content web part, if I edit my page, that's this web part that I have actually added in the center here. So I'm going to go ahead and edit the web part. And basically, one of the couple of different things that have been added, it allows you to now, over the past couple months, allows you to now point to a specific document library on your site. That wasn't an option before. It basically just said all documents on the site, not a specific library. So you can now point to a specific library. And also, just as we talked about with the news web part, it has an option related to being a hub site. So all sites in the hub. So this is really where you can kind of see that with news, with like important documents, and with other pieces of your hub site, you can actually create this rolled up view of what's going on. So you have that option. I'm just going to leave mine at document library. So I have a document library on this hub site with some content in it. Another thing that they added that was very much missing from the first iteration of this web part was the ability to filter on columns, specifically like custom columns. Like, so if you went into your library and added a column, or you added a site column or something, you initially weren't able to filter by that. So now we can do that. So if I click column name here, and then I can come down and I can even put in a letter here if I want to kind of sort this list if the list is very large. But I can come here and I can say, let's scroll down. I know I have a column I added to my library. Let's see, policy term. That was something that I added. And I think there was one called travel. So then I can go ahead and click that. And then now what it's done is it's basically, originally when I first just did document library, it was pulling all the documents from that library. And now I've done policy term equals travel, and now I only see that. So that's kind of neat. Obviously, it's something that we could do with content search. So if you're using content search web parts, that's not going to wow you very much. But it is pretty cool that we can now do that kind of filtering and stuff like that within the highlighted content web part. It makes it just more useful and more relevant to what people need, especially for roll-up scenarios. Another thing that you can do with this that they have added recently is using the tokens that we would use in views. So things like the me and the today. So like if you have like the created by is equal to me, that's something that we could often do in like SharePoint views, list and library views. You can now do that in here as well. So you can actually use those me token and the today token. So that's just something to know. You could not originally, but you can now. And then I think they just basically added a couple more. I think maybe one more layout. The film strip I think might be newer. Or cards. Maybe the cards one is actually the newer one. I don't have enough. Actually, let me remove this and then we can see what that looks like. Yeah, so right here it just goes down the page, but I think if you had this in a web part of its own, it would kind of go across and that kind of thing. But right now I just have this in a section of the page that's a 3-column. Actually, let me see if I have I think I have a 1-column down here. So I'm curious if it does go across like I think I've seen an icon. Yeah, there we go. So there's only, of course now there's only 4 documents, so it's only showing 4. But basically it would kind of go across and then down almost like a grid view in a way. It says cards, but it's kind of like I would say more accurately, a grid. Alright, so I'll just drag that back up there. Alright, let me check and see in the chat. Anything new? Cool. Alright. So that's the highlighted content web part. Like I said, I'm excited. I was a huge user of the content search web part. I did many things with content search web part in SharePoint 2013. So I think when I first started working with modern pages, I loved the look of them, but then I was like, oh, but I can't do all these roll-ups and stuff, so I can't move my customers. I can't really truly move their intranets to these modern pages until I can do these kind of roll-ups and that kind of thing. So between the hub stuff and between these changes, I'm feeling a lot more confident about getting people getting their intranets over to this. Alright, so next, want to talk about the people web part. So this is just a real quick thing. It's not huge, but it's something that I think is kind of interesting. So the people web part allows you to basically select somebody in your organization, and it will just show their name, their title, and their picture. And you could put this is a really good thing for if you have a site and you want to show who the site owner or site contact is, then you can kind of put that at the bottom. Some people would even use it to create like an our team web part and show all the people on the team. So really, I think it's pretty useful, and also kind of is a good thing to have on a page that's meant for like the entire organization to kind of get help. And what they've added here is they've basically added a more descriptive view. So if I edit the web part, I think it's the web part. Yep. So now instead of just having compact, which was at one point was the only option, then we can do descriptive, and it kind of gives this this more informative kind of card. And you can enter a description, and you can even add links for this person. So if you wanted to add a link to, some other resources that they, to their profile, or some kind of profile, or some other resources about them, you can go ahead and add that here. So that's kind of really helpful. You can kind of get this more descriptive thing. And you can even stick this, in a one column at the very bottom, and it's like our team, or here's who to ask for, here's who to go to for help, that kind of thing. And it just has more information, kind of a bigger profile. So I just think that's kind of neat. All right. So, let's see. One thing I meant to mention I didn't, is actually just when you're selecting web parts, just kind of the filtering and stuff that you can do to look at web parts, modern web parts. So as we remember, uh, from classic pages, when you would click, add a web part, you would get that portion of the top of the screen, and it would have, different sections of the types of web parts. You could click on that, then you see those web parts, and you see a description, that kind of thing. And we didn't really have that at first with modern, because it just basically, there wasn't as many modern web parts, so it was pretty cut and dry. But now, as they have added more web parts, if we click here, this is kind of what we're used to seeing. You do have a search icon, or you had search here where you could search through these. But now you can actually click this button, the arrow here, to expand. So if I expand this, then I have categories, just like I had previously. So I can click category, and I can narrow this down and find exactly what I'm looking for. And like I said, there's still not that as many web parts as we had before, but they're definitely adding. And I think one of the big jokes people have been making is the Kindle Instant Preview. I have not found a reason to utilize this yet, but definitely an interesting web part to have available. And I think if I see all, you can see that there's like Office 365 video, there's stream, and there's some other stuff there as well. Bing Maps can be interesting if you need to show a location of something. So yeah, just a little bit of information there. You can see that they're kind of getting ready and preparing this, web part selector, so that as they add more web parts, they're easy to locate. All right. So another one that I has come out that can be pretty helpful. So you guys have seen, I think you probably, if you've been watching Power Hour over the past couple of months, a few months ago, Laura did a Power Hour on Microsoft Forms. And Forms is a tool for you to be able to create very, very simple, easy, one-way forms. So that means that you might need like a site survey, or something like that. So usually it's typically like SurveyMonkey kind of stuff. Not necessarily a replacement for InfoPath, unless you just had a very, very simple form in InfoPath that you just need them to come in, input a little bit of data, and then that's basically the end of it. You get the data and do whatever you need to do. But it can be definitely useful, and like I said, I've seen people use it for like surveys of the usage of the site, or surveys about their, whatever their department does, and that kind of thing. So they have added now a Microsoft Forms web part, so you can actually put the form right on your page for users to fill out. So let me go ahead and add that. So I'll click to add Microsoft Forms, and then I can, if I'm a site owner, I can go ahead and create a new form, brand new, or I can kind of connect to an existing form. So I'm going to go ahead and say add existing, and then I got to go to Microsoft Forms because I can't remember the URL. And so I have one called Site Survey, and I'm going to grab the URL to this. So I just went to that form, click share, and then just copy the URL. Go back to my site, and I can go ahead and paste that in. And then here I can say, do I want to collect responses or show form results? So I can kind of switch between those. Maybe you want to collect responses for a while and then show them what the results were, depending on what kind of survey it was. So I go ahead and click OK. And I'll publish just so you guys can see what this looks like published. Scroll down, and then under Site Survey here, I can see that survey. So just kind of, like I said, these are really for easy forms, simple forms. They do have a little bit of branching logic in them now in Microsoft Forms, and I can go, if somebody has a chance and can look for that Power Hour about forms, you can paste that link in there, and I'll do it later if not. But Laura went into detail kind of about, the different options you have in Microsoft Forms, the things that you can do, and really what they're good for. Okay, so we don't have a ton more time, so I'm going to go ahead and go over just a couple of more, and then I will let you guys go a little bit early so you can get to that 1 o'clock session on hub sites, and they'll probably have even more information than I had. Alright, so let's go ahead. A couple more things. They did added some stuff for kind of just the design of your site. So you have the divider now. So I can add a divider, which is just kind of a nice line break onto the page, and that's really good for maybe like separating the content up in the main part of the page from like some kind of footer. Like I said, even just having like the people to contact at the bottom underneath that line divider. And hopefully with the quality of the webinar you can see that, but it's basically just a nice gray line. There's also another thing that they added was the spacer. And this is kind of neat because you can just add some blank space to kind of space things out. So you can decide if you want it to be, you can kind of drag and decide what you want that space to be. So just kind of some nicer design features that you can do, since we really can't add CSS directly on the page in like a script editor web part like we used to be able to. So those are just some things that people can utilize. And then finally, we have the file viewer web part, which replaced the document, I think it was called document web part before. And the file viewer web part I think is really neat. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. Go ahead and add document, and I'll just go to my training presentation here and open that. And so this is a PowerPoint. I can load this PowerPoint right on the page here, and then they can kind of click through. I can add a description, and it just kind of has it's a really good interface. And like I said, I can add Word documents, PowerPoints, I think even PDFs. I haven't tried yet, but I think you can add those as well. And just be able to add those directly on your page. Might be good if you have like a news article that is related to a specific presentation someone did, and then you can just put that presentation right there. And I'll go ahead and click publish. Alright, so we have about 10 minutes. I do have some stuff on Planner and Teams, but I think what I'm going to do is just go ahead and save those, because I would like to spend a little bit more time talking about how I use Planner and some of the new options. And I really want to give you guys time to get over to that meeting that I posted earlier, and I'll post that link again just to make sure you guys have that. And thanks so much, Tony, for grabbing those forms for me. Alright. Let's see. Okay. So I went ahead and posted that link again. So that starts in about 10 minutes. And I definitely didn't want you guys to miss out on that, because it's got like Mark Cashman and some MVPs. I think like even Sue Handley, I mentioned her earlier. She's going to be a part of that. And she has been working a lot with Microsoft on like hub sites and what they need from that. So I think that'll be a really interesting session. I want to give you guys time to get over and see that. So hopefully you got to see some of the new stuff and kind of got an idea of how it works, and are excited. If you don't have it quite in your tenant yet, let us know if you like these sessions. So I think Laura and I have talked about maybe making this a regular thing once a month, or however often Microsoft does updates. But if you enjoy just kind of quickly going through and seeing these changes or these new features in real time, then we can make that kind of a regular thing in between a lot of the Power Apps focused stuff that we tend to do. All right, guys. Well, I think that is it. I'll give it just a second for any other questions. Oh, actually, I think there is. Let's see. Is there an option for content editor script web parts in modern pages? Yeah, so we talked about that. There isn't yet. So that's kind of why they added like the divider and stuff like that in there. Yeah, Captain Awesome. Yep. I just, if it's my own tenant, then I get to give myself my own title. And is there article detailing the promoted state for site pages? Try moving it to a single column section. So the promoted state thing, I don't know if there's an article. I actually heard that just by somebody telling me, but it's definitely, I can look and see. I'll look and do a Google and see if somebody's kind of written about that whole promoted state thing. Power BI web part, yeah, it was in there. Cool. I think I answered everybody's questions. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great day. Enjoy the other session. We'll see you hopefully next week.